Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video, we successfully complete our two method, that is the index method. From to the index method, I get all the data, and also we successfully store all the data in our database, right? And also we checked it. So here we checked our get method, and also we insert the data in our student table. So now if you want to get the specific one ID data, then you have to work in our show, that means the show method, right? So if you want to get a specific our one data, then you can do that things with the both of this way. As I told you before, if you want to get that things with using that query builder, then you can use it like I just define as a student. You have to take one of the variable, right? So right now I just define that as a student. Okay, I just define that name as a student, and then you have to define the DB. You have to define the DB and the table. From which table you want to get the data, you have to define that table name. So I want to get our specific one ID data from our students table. So I just simply define that students table, and then here you have to define that where, right? You have to define that where condition, and into the where condition you have to define one of the conditions, because here they have one of the ID. That means in our students table, one of the field as an ID. That means this ID will be matched with our requested ID. So I just simply define that ID will be matched with our requested this ID. So I just simply define that ID, and then I have to define our fast data, right? So we have to define that fast data in particular that area. Alright, then if you want to use the eloquent model, then you can also do that work. Then you have to define the same. I just take one of the variable as a student. So I just take one of the variable as a student, and then you have to define your model. So I have already created one of the model as a student's model, and then into the student's model you have to define as a find or fail, right? So I just simply define as a find or fail, and then you have in particular that area you have to define your ID. So that is actually the ID. So if you use that student, make that sure you use it. You can say I didn't add that use. So here I define that use our app. Into the app, that is a model. That is a model folder. Into the model folder, I have created one of the models. So that is our student's model. So I just simply define as a student. Okay, I just simply define that student. So as I told you before, so whatever the things you want to use, you can use it. So here I'm using it. You can see that is actually our student. Perfect. So right now I want to do that work with using that eloquent model. Okay, so I just simply define as the eloquent model as a find or fail with this ID, and then I want to return response. So I just simply define the returned response, and into the return response I want to define with the JSON. Okay, I just simply define that JSON, and here I have to define our this student value. So I just simply added our student. Perfect. So now if you want to check it, like I just click on the save all. So I want to get one of the specific ID data, and if you want to use that show, and for the students, so that is actually the student show, and for the student show you can see there is a API will be as a get, or URL will be API student and a specific ID data. So now let's check this out. If you go to here, so that is our get method. Better I want to do that things on here. So like I want to get our specific 3 ID data, and 3 ID I just define as a Kaziarian. So I just simply define as a 3, one of the ID, it should be as a get method, right? So now if you click on the send, yeah, you can see it's perfectly getting our specific one ID data. That means the ID 3. So here I just pass one of the requested ID. So that is our requested ID will match with our student table, one of the field as a ID. Okay, so that is the condition I just defined. So into the query builder, here you can see that is our ID will be matched with our requested ID, and if you want to use that things with the eloquent model, then you have to define as a find or fail with this ID. Perfect. So we successfully complete our show, and now if you want to update, then you can also update it. Like here it should be just like that same, there's a store. I think you already know about it. So I just simply copy it, and here in our update method, here I just simply paste it. Okay, so here only we need to change one things. Like here that is our conditions, the DB, that is our table, students table. Here first of all, that is before update we have to define that condition, right? That means the where condition, and into the where condition we have to defining it our ID. That means in our students table, ID field will be matched with our requested ID. So here also they have one of the ID, it should be matched with our requested ID, and when it should be matched, then I just define our update method. So I just simply define as the update method, and after when it should be update, I want to define as a return response one of the message like as a student updated. Okay, I just simply define as a student updated. Perfect. And also that is our destroy method. That means that when if you want to delete it, then how can delete it. And for the delete here, one things like if you go to our public, like in our public, I have created one of the folder, right? Like in our public, in our backend, that is student, into the student, they have some of the images. So I also want to, when this will be as a deleted, that means this student will be deleted, then automatically our these students, this picture will be deleted. Okay, so if you want to do that work, first of all you have to get that specific fast data. So I just define one of the variable. I just take one of the variable as image, and then I just define our db and table, and from which table we want to get that fast data. So I want to get our table name as a students, right? And here you can see that is our students table. So from here I want to get our specific fast data, so I just simply added our fast data on here. Okay, so I just define our table name on particular that position, and then we have to define that condition as a where our ID will be matched with our requested ID. That means here that is actually the ID, and then I want to get the fast data. Okay, because we have to also delete it. So first of all, which data is already exist in our database, I want to get our specific fast data. And then I just simply define one of the image path. That means here we have to define that image path. So I just simply define as image underscore path. Okay, I just take one of the variable, and into this variable here I have to define our image path in particular that position. That means that is in our, I just get our specific fast data, right? I just get fast data from our table. That means here, and into this position I want to get our specific fast which data. I want to get a specific fast out from to this field. That means that this photo data, right? So here I get all our fast data. So for the reasons here I take another variable, and now I get all the data and take that things with this variable, right? So into this position I just define our fast data, and which field. Here you have to define that field name. So I want to get it our field name as a photo. So I just simply define as a photo. Okay, I think we can well understand about it. First of all, I get all that our fast data into the fast data, because here I want to specify with our specific one of the field. For the reasons here I take one of the variable, and then with this our fast data I want to specific our this field as a photo. Okay, because I want to unlink this photo. For the reasons if you want to use that unlink, so here in Laravel they have also one of the option as function as a unlink. So with this unlink I want to unlink our the specific this field data, and this field data I take the things with this variable, right? So now I just simply unlink our this path. So in Laravel fundamental I have already discussed about that things with you very clearly. I hope you already know about it. Now I want to delete it. So I just simply define as a delete as a db table, from which table you want to delete all the data. From our students table I want to delete it. So before delete we have to define that condition as a where condition. That means where its ID will be matched with our requested ID. So that is our requested ID. When it should be matched, then I want to delete it. So I just simply define our delete method. So I just simply define the delete method. Friend, I think it's very much clear to you. And then I just simply define as a return. I just simply define as a return response, right? And into the return response I want to define our some of the message. It should be show as a student. Okay, student deleted. So this type of one of the message it should be display. Okay, so I think everything is very much clear to you. Better I put some of the note for you, like if from here I want to do and get all the data, right? Get all our specific fast data. So with this code I get all that fast data, take the things with this variable, and here I define only one data. That means here I just define get only the image data. So image data, and then from here I define for the delete image. So I just simply define that image deleted, the image deleted from folder, right? So here I define that note for you, and after that this will be as if for the delete our all data, and then that is actually our response. Okay, so now perfect. So now if you click on the save all, so now I want to check our update method and also the destroy method. So now first of all here I want to delete or destroy. So if you go to our postman, like that is actually the 3 ID I want to delete. Okay, so here I define that as a delete. So that is our 3 ID. So now if you click on the send, yes, now you can see it's now showing as a student selected. That means now if you get all the data, now I just click on the get all, click on the send, and you can see there is a 1 ID data, 2 ID data, and 3 ID data is totally removed from our date position. And also I unlink our image, right here I unlink our image. Now let's check this out. If you go to our public folder, and you can see into the backend I have defined one of the student folder. Into the student folder that have one of the images. So right now this image is totally gone from here. Okay, so that means our every function is perfectly working. So friend, we successfully complete our student code. That means the destroy, the update, that is show getting a specific data, the store, and the index. So we successfully complete our student API. So here we successfully done that work. So friend, I think you can well understand about it, how can create some of the RESTful API. So don't worry, in our project, like when we'll create one of the inventory management system with using that Laravel and Vuejs, and then I will show you how can use that RESTful API. So then it will be very much interactive to you. So in our next video, I want to discuss about how can working with the JWT token. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.